Hello and welcome to a brand new Arseblog Arsecast right here on arseblog.com. How are you? Hope you're well. Thank you very much indeed, as always, for being here. It is the morning after a 2-0 win over Manchester United in the Premier League last night. 2 goals from corners. Lots of focus on Arsenal's strength from set pieces. It's being dismissed in some quarters by fans of opposition teams as industrial. We are set piece FC, corner FC, but who cares? Ask any one of them if they would prefer to win a game 2-0 by scoring from a couple of corners, or, being like Manchester United and losing a game 2-0 because you can't defend against a team that are really good at corners. I think we know which one they pick. On TV here last night in Ireland, the game was on Premier Sports. I know a lot of people had it on Amazon in the UK, but on Premier Sports. Co-commentator was former Republic of Ireland international Gary Breen, and he was talking a bit about Declan Rice and about his pre-corner take routine. He said at one point, he talked about Rice, look, he's doing his breathing exercises. And it got me wondering a bit, is there a pre-corner take routine? There's a lot of visualization in the psychology of sport, I know in golf or tennis, that trying to picture the shot you want to play before you play it can often be beneficial. Now, I know those are individual sports, but Rice's role when he's taking a corner is individual. He's on his own. It's up to him to make sure that ball comes in with the right speed, the right trajectory, the right whip, all of those things which make it so difficult for the opposition to deal with. I just had this idea of Declan Rice visualizing and sort of moving away from where he actually is physically and visualizing and seeing himself about to take the set piece, watching from on high, with a little song, a little piece of music going around and around in his head to keep him focused.
That's me in the corner.
And then, woof, he just gets it in there, and an Arsenal player, whether it's Jurriën Timber or William Saliba or whoever, is going to do something with that and score a goal. Last night it was Jurriën Timber scoring his first Arsenal goal. William Saliba with his first goal of the season as well to make it 2-0. 2 goals from corners, 2-0 to Arsenal. 3 points for Arsenal and loads to discuss about this game because I think it is very interesting, and I think the continued focus on Arsenal as not necessarily a set-piece team, but a team that is very strong from set pieces is something that we are going to talk about throughout this episode. I did enjoy Spanish television last night. DAZN, is that how you pronounce it? Or DAZN, whatever the hell, is the network. And thank you to Phil Costa, by the way, for bringing this to my attention. The Spanish commentators last night got so wrapped up in the inevitability and the way the crowd were getting into Arsenal corners. At one point, they make a reference to the movie Jaws, which in Spanish, the movie is called Tiburón, which is the Spanish word for shark. Arsenal have just got a corner. They're 2-0 up at this stage. I think there was a corner maybe 2 or 3 minutes after the second goal. And this is what it sounded like on Spanish TV.
Fran, música de tiburón, otro corner. Chin chon, chin chon, chin chon, chin chon.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. They kept saying, it's coming, it's coming. Spanish commentators doing the Jaws music. Gary Neville making those terrible noises he makes when something happens in a game. I know which I prefer. So, lots to get into in this episode, but before we do that, just a quick thing. It's very location specific. So if you are in Los Angeles or if you are in Dallas or near those areas and you would like to go and watch Fulham versus Arsenal this weekend at Cosm. Now, you would have heard me talk about Cosm during the summer when we held an event there with our friends at Arsenal Vision. It is this incredible state-of-the-art way to experience a football game. You sit there, it's literally like being in the stands. That is what your view looks like. So if you would like to go to Cosm this weekend in Dallas or Los Angeles, simply email me at competition.arseblog.com, competition@arseblog.com, and just tell me you would like to go. I'm going to pick a winner tomorrow and I will sort the details out for you. So we've got one for LA, one for Dallas. Just email competition@arseblog.com. Tell me you'd like to go and I'll pick some winners at random. For the rest of you, if you would like to go, you can get 20% off for Arsenal games at Cosm by using the code Arseblog20. Arseblog20, that's good for all Arsenal games at Cosm. So Arseblog20 is your discount code to get 20% off. For more details, go to Cosm Arsem.com. There's a link in the show notes. Right, let's get on with today's show and let's look back at what was a very important win for Arsenal last night, not least because Liverpool dropped points, so the gap at the top has closed just a little. With me to do that from Football London, it is Kaynak. Hi, Kaya.
Hi, Andrew. How you doing?
I am all right, thank you very much. All the better for seeing Arsenal win last night. And look, we can talk about the ins and outs of this, but what I think maybe first and foremost before we get into the minutiae of set pieces and corners and all of that is the fact that this was a really important game for Arsenal, not just because it's Manchester United, but because in the context of the title race, Liverpool were held to a 3-3 draw, a late equaliser from Newcastle. What a finish that was, by the way. A big mistake from Kiwior and Kelleher, but a great finish from Fabian Schär. We've talked about Liverpool having a blip. People have talked all the time about Liverpool having a blip. So as and when it happened, if you want to call a 3-3 draw at Newcastle a blip, I suppose in the context of their current form, it probably is. But it made it all the more important that Arsenal were victorious last night.
Definitely. I think last night inside the stadium was the first time where you could really sense that the fans were thinking, we're running out of margin for error. We're running out of road in the title race. I thought I felt it in the build-up to half-time when Arsenal weren't really causing United as many problems as they should have been, especially when you compare to how Arsenal played in the past 3 games. And it wasn't that sort of pedal to the metal kind of start from Arsenal. It was quite slow. It took a while to get going. And I think the fans sort of noticed that and picked up on that and started to get a bit anxious. And I wouldn't go as far as to say they were turning on the team, but they were feeling, you could sense the anxiety in the stadium. And I think that's because everyone knew what an opportunity it was, because as much as I don't know about you, but I'm still, despite the fact Liverpool have won almost every game they've played, I'm still not massively convinced by them. They were very good against Man City and very good against Real Madrid, don't get me wrong, but I'm still sort of got it in my mind when they came to the Emirates, I was slightly underwhelmed. And I just feel like despite that, they're not dropping points. And when they do drop points, Arsenal really have to pick up on it now. They can't be affording to let any opportunity slip by, because they've given Liverpool such a head start in this title race, and you could sense it in the stadium. I think you probably could sense it in the players and the way they stepped it up after the break. I think the news got through to them and they were aware that, listen, we need to win this. And I think it was a massive, massive night for Arsenal. And who knows how big it'll be in the title race. Liverpool have been good at sort of bouncing back from minor setbacks this season, but fingers crossed they don't with this one.
Yeah, I mean, they have in Mo Salah, one of the best players in the world, in some of the best form that he's ever been. So that's something that can help carry you through. It was nearly enough for them last night, not quite enough, and that's good from an Arsenal perspective. But you mentioned that first half. To what extent do you think it was a case that Arsenal were pacing themselves, or maybe playing within themselves a bit, versus what I thought was a pretty decent game plan from Manchester United? I know pound for pound, there are big differences between the two clubs and the two sides at this point, but they have got a new manager. I was listening to them talking on the commentary last night. We had it on Premier Sports in Ireland, but they're talking about a manager bringing in a new energy, and that's something that they always say, regardless of what club it is, what manager it is. He's come in, all the things that people didn't like about the team are gone to one side. He's brought this new energy, and it's a bit cliched, but I think there was something to that in the way that United set up. It's a traditional. It's the system that Ruben Amorim likes to play. But what I found interesting was there was a confidence about Manchester United that you wouldn't necessarily have expected to be there if Erik ten Hag was the manager. The game plan, to me anyway, seemed to be to condense the game into very tight central areas, preventing Arsenal from getting the ball out to the wingers. So I think it's fair to say that in that first half, Arsenal didn't play as well as we know they can, particularly in comparison to the last couple of games, Sporting away and West Ham away, where you were pretty scintillating in both halves. But I also think part of it was coming to terms with a system and an approach from Manchester United that went some way to negating how good we've been.
Yeah, I thought Arsenal did actually start quite fast. They had a few decent chances in the opening minutes. Obviously, Martinelli had the ball in the net and it was offside, and Partey probably should have scored from a corner, and that would have changed the game entirely. But once they didn't get that goal within the first 10 minutes, I thought, you're right, United grew into the game quite well. And in previous seasons, Arsenal have won the game late against United both times, but deservedly so. and they probably should have wrapped the game up considerably before they did. And that was because Erik ten Hag's approach in big matches was sit back, try and hit teams on the counter, which I always thought was weird for a guy who came from Ajax and sort of preached all this total football stuff. But he never seemed to have the confidence in his own team's ability to play the football that he seemed to want to play, whereas Amorim's come in straight away and has got United playing the way he wants. And I thought United's plan was to sort of quieten Arsenal by keeping the ball. And they did it quite well. They weren't ambitious with their passing by any stretch of the imagination, and the movement up top was pretty non-existent. I think that was a combination of maybe not having the best forwards, but also Saliba and Kiwior doing quite well. But the way they knocked it around the back was quite nice. You could see a few patterns of play, and it's ridiculous to say, but in the past 3 seasons with Man United, you've not seen any patterns of play. You had no idea what they're trying to do. And in 3 games, Amorim's got a team where you can see clearly what he's trying to do. You can see they're not there yet, and it probably will take them a while. And, you know, as Arsenal fans, we know that a lot from Mikel Arteta. It took a while for him to get it going. But you could see just the way they were knocking it around the back, the way they weren't going long, the way they were sort of keeping possession at a slightly higher line. It was good, I thought. And they managed to stunt any Arsenal momentum because Arsenal weren't able to pepper the Man United goals with shots. They weren't able to launch attack after attack because Man U weren't sat inside their own box. They were trying to play out and they were keeping the ball. And I think at half-time, Man U had more possession than Arsenal overall. So, yeah, I was impressed. And I was impressed in the press conference as well by Amorim. He sort of came out and was quite sort of, I think, measured about the reaction to the defeat. And I think he'd said after the Everton game that sort of defeats will come. He learns more from... He said he'd rather learn by winning, which I think is fair enough. But you probably learn quite a lot in defeat from your team. And to be honest, there's another world where Arsenal don't score from a set piece and Diallo and Rashford and Xerxes and all those guys come on and Arsenal get done on the counter late on. And I thought it was a pretty good game plan. Someone did mention it to me in the press room at half-time. They were like, we've got Diallo and Rashford's coming on. I was like, oh, yeah, that's a bit concerning. I've seen this film before when it comes to Arsenal. And if they hadn't got the set piece, who knows what might have happened. But I thought, you know, Amorim did as good a job as he could have done with the tools at his disposal coming to the Emirates. Yeah,
sure. It's only his 3rd or 4th game. I thought what was interesting was that point about keeping possession where sometimes they would get forward, particularly down that left-hand side and come back, and Bruno Fernandes picks it up and then goes back and they just pass it around. And I think that went quite a long way to preventing Arsenal from building any momentum themselves and sustaining any pressure, which we know that, you know, Arsenal are more than capable of doing. I thought the one player for me, and we'll obviously talk about him in a bit in relation to what happened in the second half, I think the one player for me who really stood out in that first half was William Saliba. There was a lot of focus on who we were missing. Gabriel not there. Ricardo Calafiori not there. So first start of the season in the Premier League for Jakub Kiwior. First start since the opening day of the season for Alexander Zinchenko. And I thought Saliba really imposed himself on this game, not just defensively, because there were moments. There was one brilliant moment when the ball was bouncing, and I think he could quite easily have just headed the ball back to David Raya. But he sort of held off Højlund, took a touch, put the ball back forward and went on with it and made a pass. He was trying to be the driving force in the team at times in possession. So what he had to deal with defensively, I think, was sort of meat and drink to him. I really enjoyed the bit in the second half where Garnacho had the ball and Saliba just sort of looked at him. He was just there and Garnacho's like, clumped it out for a goal kick. I think the presence of Saliba was never more evident in that moment. But as somebody who was sort of trying to play, and when you think about the players that Arsenal have in that team with Odegaard, with Rice, with Saka, you know, the ability to dictate play can come from those guys. In a half where we really didn't do that through them, Saliba's willingness to try things and make 1-2s and foray forward, I thought was really, really impressive and sort of speaks to the, I don't know if you can say growing maturity, because I think he's always looked that way, but I was really, really impressed with him in the first half when you could say every other Arsenal player was fairly average.
Yeah, I totally agree. We have to do halftime ratings on Football London, and Saliba got my halftime man of the match.
Halftime ratings.
Yeah, I thought he was outstanding. He also got my full-time man of the match. I thought he was outstanding.
Yeah.
Overall, I think Saliba, we all talk about he's fantastic on the ball, fantastic 1v1 defender, quick, elegant, everything you need in a modern centre-back. But what we don't talk about so much is his character. And I wasn't worried about him because he always steps up and delivers in big occasions. You think probably I actually thought the early part of the season he wasn't at his best. I thought since November he's really stepped it up a notch like the rest of the team. But I've noticed it with him in particular. And you think back to Sporting Lisbon, Victor Gyökeres, the most informed forward in Europe right now, barely gets a shot, barely gets a sniff, even a touch in the box. And that's because William Saliba has him in his pocket. Gabriel played a part as well, but Saliba was fantastic. And the duels with Haaland, those kind of big games, Saliba loves it. He loves stepping up into those kind of occasions. And I always think that you can rely on him to deliver. And I think because he's maybe a bit quieter and a bit less showy than Gabriel and a bit less sort of chest thumping and sliding into tackles and all that kind of stuff, we maybe forget that this guy's got the mental strength as well as the physical and the sort of the technical and all that kind of stuff. Like, I think he's really, really good. So when the opportunity was there for him to step up and be the senior partner, if you like, because he is often the junior one when it comes to Gabriel, I thought he dealt with it well. And Jakub Kiwior, I thought played well, but he's not the sort of the loud leader of the back line like Gabriel is. So you need someone to do it in that back line. And Saliba was happy to step up. And like you say, I thought he did really well. There were a couple of drives, like you mentioned, where he just decided, screw it, I'm going into the opposition half. I'm going to make us attack because we are being too pedestrian. And it nearly worked on a couple of occasions. And the goal was probably the most fortunate thing of the evening, going in off his backside. But I think he deserved it because he played so well. And I think his consistency in these past few games has been really impressive. I think there's a deep dive to be done there in terms of how he's able to maintain that consistency and how he's able to maintain that sort of measured approach, because most 23-year-olds, if they're playing that well, would probably be getting a bit high on their own supply. But I've never felt that from Saliba. I've never felt he gets too far ahead of himself. He always seems very measured and calm and sort of learning from his mistakes and looking to improve. And that's a really good trait. And yeah, mentally, I think he's a fantastic player as well as all the other attributes he's got.
Completely agree. We'll come to the goal, fortunate as it might have been in a couple of moments. But there must have been a conversation at halftime because there was a little scare. Dalot had a shot wide just before the break, and that was just a moment of carelessness from Kiwior, who otherwise, I have to say, I thought was really good. I thought he had a very composed game for his first start of the season. But that was a moment, and look, that can happen. Thankfully, it went wide. But there must have been a conversation at halftime about Arsenal needing to do more, needing to put on more pressure, needing to play the game more in the opposition half. And I don't think, because we'll tie this obviously into set pieces, right? I don't think there is or any way you can argue that the set pieces that we had in that half were as a direct consequence of the performance and playing higher up the pitch. You don't get corners for free. The ref doesn't say have a corner. It's usually as a consequence of you driving forward and a cross being blocked or a shot being blocked or something like that. That playing the game in the opposition half allows you to generate these set piece opportunities. And obviously Arsenal capitalised on that, but you could see very early on in that second half that we were playing with a bit more intent, that we came out. There was a Rice shot, I think, that deflected over the bar. There was another moment early on. I think Martinelli, he ran at the corner of the box. I want a bit more conviction from Gabriel Martinelli in that moment. Agreed. Where I think against Harry Maguire, who's not the quickest with his feet as it stands and is just back from a couple of months out with injury, I think he could have tried to take him on and work a better shooting position. I mean, we did get a corner from it, but still, you could see from those early exchanges that there was a lot more intent about Arsenal in that second half.
Yeah, I think they stepped it up a notch. And Arteta said after the game that they tweaked a few things. I don't quite know what it was, but it seemed that they were just saying, look, we need to do things a bit quicker. We need to stretch the game a bit more, and we need to play in the opposition half, like you said. And it was interesting. Ruben Amorim sort of made a point after the game that Arsenal's wingers are quite happy to go on the outside because they don't mind getting the corner. But you don't get to that position, like you mentioned, unless you get yourself into the final third. And the build-up play is key, and without sounding too much like a journalist, I asked Mikel Arteta about this in the pre-match press conference, and he basically said he doesn't train set pieces separate from the rest of the training session, if that makes sense. So I think we all sort of know the old adage of back in the day when training it used to be 15 minutes of set piece training at the end of sessions, and everyone would hate it and everyone would get bored. And Arteta doesn't do it like that. He does it as part of the main session. And I think that's because he views it as, well, what do you do to get into the set piece situations? What do you do to create the corners? And he said some really interesting stuff about that, I thought, actually.
Doesn't that tie in with what Declan Rice said afterwards? He was on TV afterwards. You know, that idea that set piece training is like, oh God, we've got to go through this. It's attack versus defense. We've got to head stuff out. And he said, we never get bored. When you go up for a corner, there's a chance to score a goal. It's not a chance to relax and chill. And like that mindset seems pretty obvious to me and to you, I'm sure to everybody listening, that a corner or a set piece is a good chance to get a goal. But I think it's now become separated from this idea of like, oh, we'll just do some set piece training. We'll do some heading. We'll do, you know, if you can work it into everything that you do, it becomes far more effective. Yeah,
I agree. And I've never actually understood the snobbery when it comes to set pieces. So my editor last night sent me a message saying, calling Arsenal the Waitrose Stoke. And as funny as it was, I didn't quite understand the critique, because I think there's ways of scoring goals, and if you can get a goal from a set piece, then they count just as much as a goal from open play.
Yeah,
and there's no reason. The whole criticism of Arsenal only score from set pieces, and Mikel Arteta has only been able to coach a team that can score from set pieces after 5 years. I don't understand it. And I get that teams are sort of looking for a stick to beat Arsenal with because Arsenal are really good right now and there's not that many sticks to beat Arsenal with. But I think that the set piece goals are, they're really important. Like, you can win. Big games are often decided on a set piece. Think of countless big games that are decided on a set piece. And Arsenal, if they had won at Manchester City at the Etihad, for example, the set piece would have been the thing that won it for them. There's been last night, set pieces won it for them. Against West Ham, set piece breaks the game open and they go on to score 4 or 5. But who knows, if it had been 0-0 and Gabriel hadn't scored early, maybe it wouldn't have gone on to be as emphatic as it was. So, yeah, I don't understand the snobbery of set pieces. I think it's a really important part of the game. And I've always sort of thought it was weird the way people are like, oh, why are they hiring a set piece coach? What's the point of that? When I first heard about set piece coaches, I was like, yeah, it makes total sense.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think the like, if you're on the receiving end of it, I get it. You know, you want to have a bit of a bite back. You're like, oh, you can only score from headers, or you're, you know, Arsenal are the new Stoke or whatever the fuck. But like, to me, I think what's happened at Arsenal over the last couple of years will be consequential. And I don't just mean for Arsenal. I mean, like, if you're a manager of any Premier League team, and not just any Premier League team, any professional football team, and you're looking at how accomplished Arsenal have become at set pieces, you can't ignore that. Like, I think it is going to have a change in the game in terms of how teams are coached, how teams are managed, what they try and do from set pieces, the variation, the invention, all of those things that you can do to make yourself more threatening from set pieces. If you're a manager and you're not paying attention to that, you're not doing your job properly in this day and age. You're just not. And I think what's also maybe changing the perception of this is that set piece goals have very often been associated with, for want of a better word, teams who play kind of Route 1, unimaginative, industrial football. Lump it up to the big man, get a corner, get your centre halves up, and it's sort of like lowest common denominator football, which I think Arteta has gone some way to changing the perception of now, because to be as good as you need to beat a team like Manchester City, you have to be brilliant at everything. And I think he said this last season, we have to be as good as we can be at every aspect of the game, whether it's set pieces, throw-ins, goal kicks, long pass, all of it, right? It doesn't make any sense to ignore or to view one part of the game as inferior when it can be as important as we have seen it become for Arsenal. So they're brilliant at set pieces. Everyone, I watched a bit of video this morning about one of those very online Manchester United guys. Oh, bloody hell! What are they doing? We all know what they're doing. You all know what Arsenal want to do. You still can't fucking stop it.
Yeah, I looked up the stats because I was interested. Like, are Man U bad at corners? No. Like less than a third of the goals they've conceded have been from set pieces this season. Like, they're not bad. And Onana was actually really good at coming and punching crosses in the first half, I thought they dealt with it pretty well. But Arsenal tweak it. Like, the first goal is a near post corner, the second goal is a far post corner. There's no consistency. It makes it very, very, very difficult to defend. And in fairness, I think Mikel, and this is the crucial difference between like a Stoke and a Bolton and back in the day, those kind of teams. Arteta made the point afterwards, and I think he got his back up a little bit about the fact that we were all asking about set pieces and, us sort of implying that Arsenal only scored from set pieces. And I think he was at pains to make the point that Arsenal scored the most goals they've ever scored in the Premier League last season. Mm-hmm. They weren't all from set pieces. No. So Arsenal can hurt you in so many different ways. But why would they not add that extra weapon to, for want of a better word, their arsenal? Why would they not take that opportunity to score goals against you in a different manner? Like, it just seems crazy to sort of, like you say, neglect a part of the game which is really important. And it's funny. So going back to when Arteta was at Man City, he was very big on set pieces. Pep was a bit more snobby about it and a bit more old school. And it was Arteta who pushed really hard to get Nicolas Jove to come in to Man City from Brentford and took him to Arsenal after Andres Jorgensen left the club. So there's a real sort of through line in Arteta's thinking that he has always believed set pieces are massive. And I think that it makes total sense. But if you look at the kind of guy Mikel Arteta is, he's trying to find that sort of 0.001% of extra sort of boost that can get you over the line. I think set pieces are a lot more than 0.01%, but he's found the edge, and Arsenal are the best at it in the league, if not the world. And it's very, very difficult to stop. Yeah, well, listen, I remember a time when Arsenal were routinely criticised and pilloried for being soft as fuck from set pieces. And, there was probably some truth in that we were susceptible and vulnerable to teams like Stoke and Bolton or whoever when there was a long throw, when there was a corner, when there was a set piece. We weren't defensively solid. And I prefer, I have to say, this version of Arsenal. I prefer this particular iteration of what we're good at. And I think, you mentioned the goal against West Ham breaking the game open. I think the first goal last night had a significant impact on Manchester United. Yeah, I agree. The ball came in. They defended a few corners, a couple of corners in the first half, a couple of corners in the second half. But the ball comes in near post. Timber's there to score the goal. Ian Wright. Timber! So he enjoyed that. But it is the goal that opens the game, and it changes the dynamic of a game in many ways, not just because you're a goal ahead, because it means the opposition have to behave differently. They have to come out a bit. But I think you could see on the faces of those Manchester United defenders like, oh, shit. Yeah, the air went totally out of the balloon. And you think back to, so last season after Dubai, Arsenal went on a fantastic run, which is, this sort of mini run is starting to have some of the similar signs of that, and hopefully it continues. And a lot of the goals that broke games open were from set pieces. So think back to the 5-0 win against Palace. Gabriel scores 2 from corners in the first half. Against West Ham, they win 6-0 at the London Stadium, but the first 2 goals are Saliba and Gabriel from, I think, a free kick and a corner. And there was a lot of other games like that. I think against Newcastle, they beat them 4-1, first goal was from a corner. There was lots of games like that. I can't recall the specific stats off the top of my head, but so many games where either a corner or a second face from a corner or a dead ball or a free kick, like, if a team is trying to defend against you and low block you, which Arsenal get a lot, and Man Utd didn't do that, I don't think, last night, in fairness, but most of the time they get that a lot. Probably the best way, if you can't go through them, go over them. Sort of, that is kind of the best way to do it. And Arsenal are really good. And, I think Mikel Marino joked in his press conference that Arsenal are like a basketball team, but there's nothing wrong with that. Like, they're very good at what they do. And it's a massive asset. Yeah. Be as good as you can be at all aspects. Nice moment for Timber as well. His first goal for the club. And obviously he's been through a lot. He had that big injury last season, but has, come in, regained his fitness, regained form, looks a very, very impressive player wherever he's put on the pitch. And, to score his first goal at the Emirates in a big game, just a really nice moment for him. Yeah, definitely. I think, so when Timber was coming back from his ACL, sometimes when a player comes back from a long-term injury, you're sort of worried, like, will they be able to do it straight away? I don't know about you, but I never felt that with him. because I was so impressed from what I saw in those preseason games, and granted they're preseason games and all that stuff. But those early games that I saw from him in the States last season, the Community Shield as well, I was so impressed with what I'd seen from then that I thought, wow, this is a really, really good player. And once he's sort of available and fit and firing, then Arsenal have got a real player on their hands. And so he reeks of Ajax in everything he does, in the sense that he's so technically calm. He's never looks sort of flapped on the ball. He's always making the right pass. I think if there's one part of his game that could improve, it's his delivery in the final third. I think that could sort of be tweaked a little bit. But also, a lot of players have that side to the game and then maybe don't have the other side defensively. But he's like a pit bull in every tackle. He's aggressive.
It's a great description. Yeah, like this sort of all muscle. Love that.
It's amazing. Like the way he's a really nice, calm guy off the pitch, but the second you get in a duel with him, he wants to kill you, and that is amazing. I love that from him.
Yeah.
And if you think about sort of the passivity of defenders that Arsenal have had in the past, and players who are afraid to dive in, or players who are afraid to engage, not that Timber dives in, but players who are afraid to sort of meet problems before they became massive issues. Timber's like that, and he loves it. And I think that's a massive asset to Arsenal. And listen, he's Partey can play right back, but he's the only orthodox right back Arsenal have for probably quite a long time, with Tomiyasu and Ben White out. And I think it speaks volumes that none of us are worried about that position, because he's so good. And if he's going to add goals to his game, then
all the better. Like I said, it did sort of break the game open a bit, and there's so much focus on set pieces. Obviously, that's where the second goal comes from. But we did see some nice stuff from Arsenal after that goal. That the confidence was boosted. United maybe a little bit rattled. I think there were some good combinations between Saka and Odegaard. Onana made a very good save down at his near post to deny Saka. So there is a bit more going on than just those set pieces.
Yeah, and there was a good chance for Havertz as well. Yeah. But again, why set pieces are so important is because Arsenal don't have a Haaland. They don't have a Salah. Saka's been fantastic in terms of numbers this season, but he's not on their level yet. And if you don't have that, you need to find ways of scoring in all other formats. But yeah, Arsenal created some nice opening smoke and play. The ball from Odegaard to Saka, I think it was offside actually, his shot that Onana saved. But that link up is just, it's so nice seeing it back. It's such a difference. And Arsenal look so much more threatening going forward. Teams look really afraid of Arsenal when they come at them, whereas before it felt like they could keep them at arm's length. And Havertz had a good chance. I thought he should have scored. But Arsenal really could have won 4-5-6 last night. Like, it wouldn't have been flattering to them, I don't think. And they stepped it up big time.
There was a moment at 1-0 though where David Raya was called into action. United creating a chance from a set piece, is it? United fans, if that's what's going on. It was pretty careless from Alexander Zinchenko, who I thought, had come in and done well. But that aspect of his game where he can just do something unnecessary and a bit silly caused us a problem. He picked up a yellow card. There's a free kick just outside the box. It's a good header from De Ligt, and actually that reverse angle that you get on that David Raya save tells you just how good it was, because not only did he get fingertips to it, he was able to sort of propel the ball away a bit to ensure that there was no chance of a tap in. So that was a big moment in the game, I think.
Yeah, I agree. With Zinnia, I find with him that he gets to about 60, 65 minutes and he just runs out of puff. And in fairness, this was his first start since the opening day, like you say, in the Premier League. So that's to be sort of expected. But you can't rely on him for 90 minutes. You can rely on him he'll give you 65, 70 minutes of really, really good football. But once he goes past that, you need to get him off. And I remember thinking this last season against Aston Villa, where he was kept on until very, very late. And I think he was maybe at fault for the first Villa goal. I can't quite remember it exactly. But when Villa sort of, derailed the title race, he was at fault for it. But that's because he's been left on a bit too long. And with Zinchenko, my thing is, if you love him for what he is and don't hate him for what he isn't, then you've got a really good player there, a really useful asset. And I thought he did a good job last night against, it could have been, United have got some good wingers. They've not got many good players, but they've got good wingers, and they could have been a real issue for him. And I don't think he had any issues until that Diallo moment. And fair play to Arteta, straight away took him off, made that decision. And once Timber switched that left side, it was game over for United in terms of an attacking threat. And then on Raya's save, as much as I loved Aaron Ramsdale, what Raya is so good at is staying focused in the game. He won't give a team a stupid moment that allows them back in. He won't give them a free pass. He won't give them a get out of jail free card, because he's so focused and he's so intense in terms of how he's able to just read the game and be present within the game. And I don't know if we ever really had that with Ramsdale. As much as he was a good goalie and could do great things, you always felt like in those games where Arsenal spent most of the game in the opposition half, Ramsdale would potentially switch off a little bit and you'd be open to, and he'd get a bit cold and he wouldn't be hot in terms of making the saves, and he'd maybe be open to conceding a goal like that. But yeah, Raya's really good at staying switched on, and that's what you need from a goalie for a top team. Like, that's the skill of being a goalie for a top team, because lots of goalies are great for teams in the lower half when they're making a save every 30 seconds. But when you step up into a big team, you need to be able to keep yourself present within the game, and Raya's fantastic at that.
He seems very confident now, doesn't he? That the David Raya that came in last season obviously took a little while to settle in. There were a couple of moments here or there, but I think what he can give the team with his handling, with his saves, and I think in particular over the last few games, what we've seen with David Raya with the ball at his feet, it was often talked about as a big strength, and you're sort of like, is it really? I think it absolutely is. You know, he's basically a sweeper when Arsenal are in possession, and he's our last line of defence when the opposition come forward. And in both those roles, I think he is absolutely at the top of his game right now. And
there was also not quite a ping, but sort of slightly, it got a little bit of elevation on it to Kai Havertz in the first half. Where United had pressed a little bit higher, and he's got that in his game. Like, his pass selection is generally very good. He's not afraid to go long, which I think is a good quality to have. But yeah, his pass selections, just to add to those skills you were outlining, his pass selection's great. Yeah.
So look, the second goal comes from a corner that Manchester United will feel they probably shouldn't have conceded. But again, it's pressure in the opposition half. I think it's Martin Odegaard and Marcus Rashford in the corner. You can see what Rashford is trying to do. He's trying to just clip the ball up and then hoof it back down the pitch. It's a wet night, the ball's a bit slippy, and he makes a mistake and puts it out for a corner. From there, delivery from Saka is excellent. Partey's there at the back post, heads it in off William Saliba's arse, basically. He doesn't care where it's gone in off. It's his goal, his first goal of the season. And again, like we said, I think he deserved that based on the performance overall. It's his first goal of the season. That man likes a celebration, doesn't he? Whether he scores or doesn't score, he feels it.
I really loved how ready he was to celebrate, even though it went off his arse. Like, he was so ready to sort of... He was like most players, if they sort of it goes in, fortunately, they might be like, "Oh, wow, that's happened." And there's a few moments where they're sort of looking around, sort of questioning if it actually has happened. But Saliba was sprinting full pelt straight over into that corner to celebrate. And yeah, when he doesn't score as the ultimate hype man, I still remember his getting Trossard to the binoculars and all that kind of stuff. And he's great. He's great for the passion, and I think, again, like we were mentioning before, for all his coolness and calmness, you can see that he really, really does care, and like, he really lives every minute of it, and that passion is massive, and I think it's a huge part of his game. And yeah, he deserved the luck. He deserved it going in off the backside, and Arsenal deserved it for consistent, fantastic set-piece delivery.
Yeah, because the United dressing room, when they saw the team sheets, must have been like, oh, no Gabriel, great. No Ricardo Calafiori, great. But as I said in the blog today, we're like a hydra. Just cut off one head and two more grow back, and they're just as good at heading the ball as anybody else. The presence, the menace, the way we tormented United from those set pieces was evident. The crowd really loved it. You could hear the whoa, every time the corners get taken. That's got to be. We've been on the other end of that, as I mentioned. You go away to Stoke City and you look at Rory Delap and he's got a fucking 50-yard throw in, and you're thinking, and their fans are doing it. And it does add to the occasion. It makes you nervous. I mean, there were moments where United, there was one Declan Rice delivery that Onana punched away from under the crossbar. There was another one headed off the line. I think it was Xerxes who flicked it on. It was headed off the line. And at one point, the TV cameras, Arsenal have a corner, TV cameras cut to Ruben Amorim on the sideline. And he's sitting there like, with his head in his hands, like he cannot watch what's going on. It's like he was watching the last kick of a penalty shootout. Like he couldn't bear to watch because he just feared what was going to happen. And I think that tells you a lot about Arsenal. It obviously tells you a bit about what he's got to do with his Manchester United team. But that level of threat where an opposition manager literally can't bring himself to look at what's happening on the pitch says so much about how effective Arsenal are in these situations.
Do you remember as well when I think they scored against Spurs at the North London derby, and there was like some Spurs fan cam footage, and the Spurs fans had their back to the play when Rice was 1-0 to take the corner. Like that's the level Arsenal are at right now. And I don't know if I'll ever forgive Mikel Merino for not scoring after the sort of the ooh.
Oh yeah.
If he'd done that, it would have been the funniest goal of all time. It would have been amazing. And we were robbed of that, unfortunately. It was a really good chance, actually. He probably should have scored.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it's getting to the point where... Do you remember Stoke were playing, I think it was Hull, and Boaz Myhill, the Hull goalie, sort of had the chance to put it out for a throw, but panicked and sort of turned around and put it out for a corner.
Yeah.
I don't know if we're quite reaching that status yet where teams are trying to sort of deflect the ball in a different way so it goes for a throw-in or something. But yeah, it's obviously a weapon, and Arsenal are known for it across the Premier League. They're known for being really, really strong at set pieces, and I think opposition teams are trying to find a way to stop it. But I don't know if the only team who I think have dealt with it well were Porto in the Champions League. Yeah. And the way they dealt with it was just by falling over whenever they got touched. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you get that in the Premier League. I don't know if you get those fouls in the Premier League. So I don't genuinely know how you can stop it, because if Gabriel was running powerfully, I know Gabriel wasn't playing last night, or Saliba was running powerfully, I think it was Partey was sort of the main target for set pieces. If they're running powerfully and you don't know where the ball's going, there's not an awful lot you can do. It's sort of you're just waiting and hoping that it sort of fortune shines on you. But it's tough. You can try not to give set pieces away by keeping the ball, and like that's what United did quite effectively in the first half. But eventually they're going to come, and yeah, it's a real thing for Arsenal, and yeah, a massive, massive weapon in the title race.
And a big win. And Arteta said afterwards, the game plan is to try and find weaknesses within the opposition setup and exploit those weaknesses. They're not always going to be from set pieces, of course. There are different ways that you can hurt the opposition. I just wanted to ask you about it. Just something occurred to me at one point when Martinelli had the ball. And it sort of plays into this discussion a little bit, where there was part of me just wondering, like, is the easy option for him to just win a corner rather than beat the man? Do you know what I mean? And there's been quite a bit of discussion about him and his form. And on the other side, Bukayo Saka can do what he wants. He can do what he likes. He will try and beat the man. He often wins corners by trying to beat the man. I just got the sense a couple of times last night that Martinelli thought, I'll just fucking win the corner here.
Yeah.
And I wondered, do you think in some ways, not that it's inhibiting his game, but that easy option, if you want to call it that, might be, maybe he takes that a little too often, whereas perhaps he could... It's hard to find the balance, isn't it? Where, like, actually, if I win a corner, this could be really good for my team. If I try and overcomplicate it and lose possession, it might spark a counter-attack. But I just had that thought with Martinelli in particular, that maybe that's just in the back of his mind, and it's taking a little away from him.
So I don't know if I think it's that. I think with Martinelli, his decision-making in the final third is probably the thing he needs to work on the most. So he is a good finisher, but you have to choose the right time to get your shot off. And I think he will often shoot at the wrong time or go to the byline and try and put in a cross. And his delivery is not always the greatest when he's shown onto his left foot. And in those situations, I think that he can be sort of dealt with, and teams deal with him by showing him down the line, which leads to corners. So that's a way to stop Martinelli. When I did speak to an analyst at an opposition team about this, and sort of they were saying that they feel the way you can stop Martinelli is if you show him down the line on his left foot, then he's not really a threat because his delivery on his left isn't great, which obviously then does lead to corners. So I don't know if it's as deliberate as you were describing there, but listen, we can never know because we'll never be in his head on a
Sure.
football pitch. But I think his decision making really needs to be worked on in that final third. And I'll be honest, I think that we need more from Martinelli at this point in the season, at this point in the title race as well, because that should have been a Gabriel Martinelli game, I thought, in terms of the spaces that Man United were leaving him behind with the wing-backs. And the ball over the top to Saka in behind Malacia was on a lot, and the ball over the top to Martinelli in behind Dalot was on a lot. And in fairness, I think maybe Arsenal didn't find him correctly. But when they did, and that you mentioned that earlier, you mentioned the one where he sort of came in from the side of the box and shot straight away at Maguire's feet. I think he needs to be making the right decision in that scenario. He needs to be cutting in and having a shot, and he needs to be sort of making the right calls. And obviously it's easier said than done. And we can all sort of be the best player in the world when we're watching from the stand. But I do think that, there's something a little bit missing from Martinelli. And I think maybe when he gets into the final third, he doesn't have that clarity of mind that the best finishers do sometimes. But then again, there are some games where he's fantastic and he puts them away. So, I don't know. I think that it's interesting that when Arsenal have looked for forwards, like go back to Mudryk a couple years ago, Mudryk is ostensibly Martinelli's position and Martinelli's clone in many ways in terms of pace, but obviously not other things as it's turned out. But the fact that Arsenal were willing to go and spend so much money on a player who is essentially the same guy suggests that maybe they think there's a room for improvement there as well. And you look at all the links in the summer to Nico Williams and those kind of guys, and I think maybe Mikel thinks, listen, you talk about the fine margins and the extra 0.01%. Martinelli's a great player, but I think there's space for someone who can be even better on that left wing. Don't get me wrong, I think he's a fantastic player and I really like him, and I'd love for him to start scoring goals again. But I think it's getting to the point now where it's too consistent that he goes on these runs and makes these bad decisions in the final third. And he'll have a game where you think, oh, maybe I was wrong after all. But I think it's happening too often, and I think he needs to find a way of being a bit more effective in the final third, because, like you said, Saka's dealt with it. Saka's dealt with getting more attention, and Martinelli, I think, needs to be on that level. And it's hard because Saka's probably the best player in the Premier League, or one of the best players in the Premier League, but that's what Arsenal need from him, and he's not quite delivering that at the moment.
I agree. It's 4 goals and 3 assists in 19 appearances this season. So there is definitely room for improvement in terms of end product. I think your point about where Arsenal have been looking to add in the transfer market over the last couple of seasons is very interesting. So we'll see what happens with Martinelli. Hopefully, I think the Martinelli that got 15 goals and season before last, and the Martinelli that got 10 goals as a kid when he came in first, it felt like there was a bit more, like what he was doing was more instinctive.
Yeah, I agree totally.
Whereas now, I don't know if it's too much time to think. I don't know if it's a loss of confidence. I don't know if it's overcoaching or a combination of all of those things. But he seems to have just lost that instinctive thing which made him such an exciting player.
I wonder if it's maybe as well opposition teams becoming more aware of him and
maybe
learning how to deal with him. Because Man United, as much as he had that chance, they dealt with him pretty well. And like I mentioned, opposition teams are figuring out how to stop him, but it's now up to him to deal with that, and that's what the best players do. They find ways to keep scoring.
Yeah. So look, 2-0 win, important win in the context of the title race, because Liverpool drew, so you get a couple of points back. It was quite funny, Declan Rice going, what are they? They're still 10 points ahead, aren't they? And the interviewer said, no, it's 7. He was going, oh yeah, well 7, okay. You don't pay attention to the title race until February is what he was saying. I thought that was quite funny, where he didn't really know how far Liverpool were ahead of Arsenal. But it was a game that Arsenal needed to win. I think maybe since the last interlull as well, as we talk about individuals and we talk about some key players, I think we've also got to acknowledge that the squad has been important for Mikel Arteta. Jorginho's come in and done a good job. Kiwior came in last night and did a good job, I thought. He had that moment in the first half, but overall, it was an impressive performance from him, quite calm and assured. Zinchenko, good until that moment where he wasn't. Arteta took him off. We've got Timber at right back. We've been able to move things around a little bit, shift things around in the final third too. In midfield, obviously Marino is there now, Partey is there now. So we are seeing Arteta use the full extent of his squad. So just sort of finally, as we look ahead to Fulham on Sunday, just briefly, we don't have to go into any great detail because we haven't heard from the manager yet. There's a press conference tomorrow. Obviously, he'll give us a bit more info. But is it one of those games where you think we might see another couple of changes? Jesus didn't get off the bench. Sterling didn't get off the bench. With the schedule the way it is it timely that Mikel Arteta has found a way to integrate some of these squad players, even if it is by necessity, let's say in the example of Kiwior last night, that when they've come in, they've been able to step up and perform and help Arsenal win games?
Yeah, I think just on Kiwior, I think there was a lot of overreaction to him coming in last night. I think people on sort of social media were acting like he was the second coming of Igor Stefanovs or something. Like he's a good defender in his own right, and I think maybe the people have over-indexed sort of. I think he had a difficult moment with Jared Bowen and a difficult moment with Victor Gyökeres, but he's still a really, really good player, and I think people forgot that. And you need those kind of players. Like in the Invincibles, I looked this up the other day. Pascal Sigan played 18 games. Mm-hmm. And people don't think of him as Campbell, Toure, Lauren, Cole, that back four, but he played nearly half the matches. Like he was a big part of that team. And you need those kind of guys to come in and maintain the level. And Kiwior did that. And Zinchenko, for like you said, for an hour, did that as well. And I think that's important. And Mikel's spoken a lot about keeping players involved and keeping players feeling like they're a part of things. And I think you looked at that Nottingham Forest team selection where I think we're all caught a bit off guard by Jesus starting, and I think there was a few others. And I think he basically wanted to reward the players who'd stayed behind in the international break and say, look, I see what you're doing on the training grounds. I'm going to give you minutes. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see something similar against Fulham at the weekend, because I think obviously the Champions League is coming up. Monaco are a good side in the Champions League this year. They've done quite well. They've beaten Barcelona, so they're not to be sort of taken lightly. And Mikel tends to save his full-strength team for the Champions League. So, yeah, I wouldn't be too surprised if we see a few changes. I think it's important for Arsenal to rotate, and they can. They've got the ability to do that. And I don't think the Gabriel and Calafiori injuries are too severe. So that's positive. But I wouldn't be too surprised if we see Zinchenko and Kiwior keep their spots. Fulham are a good team. Mm-hmm. Don't get me wrong. They beat Arsenal deservedly last season, and they've got some good results this season as well. But yeah, if Trossard comes in, or Jesus comes in, or Jorginho comes in, I wouldn't be surprised. And a lot of these Arsenal players have been dealing with. I'm trying to think of any Arsenal player who hasn't had an injury problem this season, and I'm struggling. Maybe you can think of one, but I can't think of a single one. And Arteta will be fully aware of that, and they're managing minutes. They're wanting to sort of mix it up and change things around. And yeah, rotation is a big part of that. And I think Arteta was criticised for not being able to do it before. He was often criticised for, let's think of, I don't know, Lokonga or Vieira, and those guys never got minutes. But I think he's become better at it over time as he's trusting his squad a bit more, and they're sort of his guys. And I think he said it last night about Kiwior and Zinchenko, we trust them. And I think he genuinely does trust pretty much every member of this Arsenal squad. And that's a big difference from years gone by. So if he needs to throw a second string player in against Fulham, I don't think he's got an issue with it. And yeah, that's positive for Arsenal because it means the standards of the squad is really good. Yeah,
it allows you to not overstress some of those players who are experiencing injuries. And that's what he said, I think, pre-game, didn't he? He talked about, they've kept a few away from training because, they're going to exacerbate a problem that they have. Yeah. So we'll see what sort of a team he can put out against Fulham. But after the last 4 games following the interlull, you can be confident that these guys can come in and deliver, and fingers crossed they do that. Right, we better leave it there. Kaya, as ever, thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Cheers, Andrew.
Thank you very much indeed to Kaya. You can find him in all the usual social media places. And of course, he writes about Arsenal for Football London. Right, there's not a lot else going on this morning, so I do want to get this podcast out to you. I just want to remind you that the Goodly Morning Arsecast Extra mugs are still on sale, raising funds for 2 great causes, Oscar's Kids and children's hospices across London. Every penny that we make from these mugs is is going to go and support those two great charities and the work that they do for kids and the families of those kids. So if you're looking for a Christmas present for the Arsenal fan, or at least the Arsecast extra fan in your life, check the show notes. We've got a link to the mugs there. And as I said, every single penny from them is going to go to charity. Thank you to everybody who has bought one. Thank you to everybody who's been sending us pictures of them. I hope your coffee, your tea, your Lemsip Max Strength, which is what I was drinking this morning, tastes even better from your brand new mug. Okay, we will look ahead in more detail to the Fulham game on Sunday. We'll do that on Friday afternoon. You can join myself and Lewis Ambrose over on Patreon if you'd like to get on board there. It's just $6 a month and it gives you instant access to everything that we do over there. You can hear myself and Lewis talk in more detail about our game against Fulham at patreon.com/Arseblog. That's patreon.com/Arseblog. Okay, let's leave it there. Let's enjoy everyone's piss being boiled by Arsenal being really good at set pieces. Doesn't matter to us. We've got the points, we've got the goals. They can all just kind of go fuck themselves. So for now, take it easy, folks, and we will catch you on the next one. Until then, cheers. Bye-bye.
Very first light, Chief. Sharks come cruising. So we formed ourselves into tight groups. You know, it's kind of like old squares in a battle, like you see in a calendar, like the Battle of Waterloo, and the idea was shark comes to the nearest man, that man he starts pounding and hollering and screaming. Sometimes the shark would go away. Sometimes he wouldn't go away. Sometimes that shark, he looks right into you, right into your eyes. You know the thing about a shark, he's got lifeless eyes, black eyes, like a doll's eyes. When he comes at you, he doesn't seem to be living until he bites you. And those black eyes roll over white, and then you hear that terrible high-pitched screaming.
¡Gol, gol, gol, gol! ¡Saliba es el que la ha colado! ¡Gol del Arsenal! Chin chon, chin chon, chin chon, chin chon.